It was 1917, and America was booming. The country was riding a wave of industrial optimism and technological wonder. New inventions were changing everyday life at a pace nobody had ever seen before. Electricity, automobiles, telephones. The modern world was being born right before people's eyes. And at the center of this new world was a miraculous new element that scientists had only recently discovered. An element that glowed in the dark. That seemed to pulse with an almost magical energy. Scientists called it radium. And in 1917, radium was not feared. It was celebrated. It was marketed as a miracle of modern science. A gift from nature itself. Something that could heal the sick, beautify the young, and power the future. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew what radium was really doing to the human body. And by the time they found out, it was already too late for hundreds of young women whose only crime was showing up to work. In the early 20th century, radium was everywhere. It was in toothpaste marketed as giving you a healthy, glowing smile. It was in face creams promising eternal youth and beauty. It was in health tonics that claimed to cure everything from arthritis to depression. Wealthy Americans paid enormous sums for radium spa treatments. Doctors prescribed radium water to their patients. The element discovered by Marie Curie in 1898 had become a cultural phenomenon. A symbol of modern progress and scientific achievement. Newspapers ran glowing articles about its miraculous properties. Advertisements featured smiling, healthy people holding radium products. The entire country was in the grip of a radium craze, and companies were making fortunes selling the dream of a glowing, healthy future. None of them were telling their customers the truth, because the truth would have destroyed everything. In 1917, the United States Radium Corporation opened a watch dial painting factory in Orange, New Jersey. Their product was a luminous paint called Undark, made from radium. It glowed in the dark and was used to paint the numbers on watch and clock dials so soldiers could read their watches at night during the war. The factory needed workers who could handle fine, detailed painting work. Young women were perfect for the job. Hundreds of them were hired from the local community. Some as young as 15 years old. The pay was excellent by the standards of the time, far better than most jobs available to young women in 1917. They were the envy of their friends and neighbors. They laughed and socialized as they worked. They were proud of their jobs, proud of their contribution to the war effort, and completely unaware of what the paint they worked with every single day was doing to their bodies. The technique the women were taught seemed innocent enough. To get a fine point on their paintbrushes, they were instructed to use a method their supervisors called lip dip paint. They would put the tip of the brush in their mouth to shape it to a fine point, then dip it in the radium paint, then apply it to the watch dial. Lip, dip, paint, lip, dip, paint. They repeated this motion hundreds of times every single day, ingesting tiny amounts of radium with every single brushstroke. When some of the women asked their supervisors whether the paint was safe, they were told absolutely. The supervisors told them radium was completely harmless, that it was good for them even. Some supervisors reportedly told the women the paint would give them rosy cheeks and make them healthier. These were lies. Deliberate, calculated lies told by people who knew the truth and chose to hide it. Despite the danger, there was something undeniably magical about working with radium paint. The women would leave the factory at the end of their shifts literally glowing in the dark. Their hair, their skin, their clothing, all shimmering with an eerie green luminescence from the radium dust that settled on everything around them. Some of the women embraced it. They painted their nails with the radium paint to impress their friends. Some painted their teeth so their smiles would glow at dances. They called themselves the Ghost Girls. They laughed about it. They were young and alive and full of energy, and they had no reason to be afraid. The glow seemed beautiful, magical even, like something from a fairy tale. But underneath that beautiful glow, something terrible was happening. The radium was embedding itself in their bones, mistaking itself for calcium and being absorbed directly into their skeletal systems. And once inside the bone, radium does not leave. It stays, and it destroys, slowly, silently, mercilessly. The first signs appeared gradually. A toothache that would not go away, a jaw that felt strange and tender, fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. Then the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Teeth began falling out spontaneously. Jawbones began to literally crumble and rot from the inside. Women who had been healthy and vibrant just months before found themselves unable to walk. Their bones were fracturing spontaneously. Hips, spines, legs, breaking without any injury, without any cause. Simply giving way under the weight of their own bodies. Doctors were baffled. They had never seen anything like it. Some misdiagnosed the women with syphilis. Others said it was simply bad teeth or poor health. The company sent its own doctors to examine the workers. Those doctors told the women they were fine, that their symptoms had nothing to do with their work. These were more lies, because by this point, the United States Radium Corporation knew exactly what was happening to their workers. And they had decided to hide it. Internal documents later revealed that executives at the United States Radium Corporation had known about the dangers of radium exposure for years. They had seen the research. They knew what radium did to the human body when ingested. They knew their workers were being poisoned, and they made a calculated decision to say nothing, to protect their profits, to protect their reputation. They hired doctors to produce false medical reports. They pressured independent physicians not to speak publicly about what they were seeing. They spread rumors that the sick women had other diseases, that their health problems were personal, not work-related. They even had the audacity to commission a study that claimed the women were perfectly healthy while those same women were dying in hospital beds. The cynicism and cruelty of their cover-up was breathtaking. These were not ignorant men who did not know better. These were educated businessmen who knew exactly what they were doing, and they chose money over human life. Despite being desperately ill, 5 of the women decided to fight back. Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, and Albina Laris. They became known as the Radium Girls. Finding a lawyer willing to take their case was almost impossible. The United States Radium Corporation was powerful and well-connected. Most lawyers refused to go up against them, but eventually a lawyer named Raymond Barry agreed to represent the women. The company did everything in its power to delay and obstruct the case. They argued the statute of limitations had expired. They requested postponement after postponement, hoping the women would die before the case ever reached trial. And some of them almost did. By the time the case finally went to court, some of the Radium Girls were so ill they could barely leave their beds. But they refused to give up. They showed up to court on stretchers if they had to. Because they knew they were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every worker who would come after them. The trial of the Radium Girls captured the attention of the entire nation. Newspapers across America covered every development. The public was outraged by what they read. Here were 5 young women visibly dying, barely able to sit upright in the courtroom, taking on one of the most powerful corporations in America. The contrast between the frail, suffering women and the well-dressed corporate executives sitting across from them could not have been more stark. The judge presiding over the case was visibly moved by the condition of the plaintiffs. The medical evidence presented was damning. Radium had been found embedded in the women's bones. Their bodies were literally radioactive. Under the weight of the evidence and the massive public pressure, the United States Radium Corporation finally agreed to settle. Each of the 5 women received $10,000, a sum equivalent to around $180,000. The Radium Girls changed the world. Their courage and determination in the face of unimaginable suffering led directly to the creation of the first occupational health and safety laws in the United States. For the first time in American history, corporations were held legally responsible for the health and safety of their workers. The concept of the employer's duty of care that protects every single worker in America today was established largely because of what these women endured and what they fought for. The research conducted on their bodies after their deaths contributed directly to the safety protocols developed for workers on the Manhattan Project. Their suffering literally helped shape the safety standards of the nuclear age. And decades later, when the United States government was developing its radiation safety standards for nuclear workers, it was the data from the Radium Girls that formed the foundation of those standards. They gave everything. And in doing so, they protected generations of workers who would never even know their names. Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, Albina Laris, and the hundreds of other young women who went to work every day in those factories simply trying to build a good life for themselves. They were poisoned by the very people who were supposed to protect them. They were lied to, betrayed, and abandoned by the company that profited from their labor. But they did not stay silent. They fought back with whatever strength they had left, and they won, not just for themselves, but for every worker who has ever been protected by a safety law. Every person who has ever been able to say, my employer cannot do this to me. That protection exists because of them. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Echoes of the Dead, because every single week we tell the stories of the forgotten, the betrayed, and the heroic. The people history tried to leave behind, because every single one of them deserves to be remembered. And this channel will never let the world forget them.